suffering. Unless you walk around with your eyes shut and your ears closed, you cannot miss the huge suffering in the world and in the lives of individuals. Robin will come and take us deep into this difficult subject.
In this third film, I'd like to talk about what I think probably for most people is their biggest area of struggle or doubt when it comes to God. And it is all about what we call evil or suffering or human pain. And so before we go into it, just to help us to realize that maybe God knows a little bit about this, I want to point to one verse in the Bible where Jesus is on the cross and he says, my God, why have you deserted me in his greatest hour of need? Why am I all alone, God? We'll come back to that later on, but I just wanted to start with that because it shows that Jesus himself has experienced such great suffering. In my own life, there have been 3 moments in my life when I think I've really broken into this whole, why is there evil and darkness and pain and suffering? What is the purpose? Why don't you come and help us out of it, God? How do we cope with this? Why is it so painful? The first one happened many years ago. I was a young boy. I think I was probably about 17 or 18. And, in school and things, I'd heard something about the evils of the Second World War, Nazism, and the concentration camps, but it was a bit distant. And I suddenly found myself reading this novel. It's called QB7 by Leon Uris. It's the story of a German doctor in the East End of London who was known as such a kind, caring person. Then a journalist gets hold of a backstory about this doctor, uncovers the facts and discovers that he was involved in the concentration camps, carrying out human experiments. And then the German doctor is placed on trial, Queen's Bench 7, hence QB7, and the book unveils all the things that had gone on in those camps. And I remember as a young boy, wow, this was evil and badness beyond my comprehension. But it was there. The great sufferings and evils that we find in this world. My second experience of, not of evil, but of suffering and just wasted life was about 40 years ago. My wife gave birth to a beautiful daughter. We called her, and we still call her, Zoe. And we love her deeply. And a few weeks after she was born, we were told that Zoe was never going to grow up like a normal child. And she hasn't. She can't talk. She can't walk properly. She has to be fed and toileted. Everything has to be done for her. Hardly a day has gone by when at some point I haven't thought, God, why is Zoe like this? Why can't she be like other people's daughters, other people? I would so love her to be able to just live a fuller life. It's never changed. It's never happened. Zoe is still Zoe, as she always has been and always will be. My third great personal experience of suffering, it happened, I'm a great Bradford City supporter, and I still remember vividly that day in 1985, when some of you will recall Bradford City's football ground was burnt to the ground. 56 people were killed. I can still remember police dashing into the main stand and pulling people out. I remember one policeman with his hair on fire. I remember images of people just keeling over on the seats in front of them. A crowd of people were dragged out of the stand onto the ground, and I went down with a friend, and the police wouldn't let us through, but I just said, look, we are Christian priests, we're here to pray for people, and being allowed onto the pitch and kneeling behind one or two people and holding their hands, they were in terrible pain, and praying for them and praying to God to ease their pain. Anyway, you will have your own experiences of evil, of suffering, of wastage, and of your own mind thinking, why? If there is a God, how does it fit with all these terrible things that happen? You will have lost people. You will have heard stories. You will have read books, seen films of, and you will have thought, if there is a God, why? Well, that's what we're thinking about and trying to find some help with in this film.
God and suffering. Explain if you can. A baby dies. A mountain crumbles. A war is begun. And in the middle, ordinary, innocent people living innocent and ordinary lives. Evil and suffering walk the land. And where is God? Where is his pain? Does he know about Gaza? Does he know about Golgotha, where the dear Lord was crucified? He died to save us all.
I wonder if the greatest single evil that has ever struck our planet is one that we have created and continue to create ourselves. We used to call it the coming ecological disaster. Now we call it the ecological crisis. You know, when it comes to telling stories, the Bible is not a book of fairy tales. It's a book which tells the real truth. And from beginning to end, it wrestles with the suffering, the evil, the pain that is in the world. It begins with us in a garden. God has provided for all of our needs. But there is one tree, we're not supposed to touch it. But it is God's tree. But of course, as soon as God is out of the garden, Adam and Eve, they can't get there fast enough. They want God's tree, God's fruit, God's power, God's position, God's mind. That's where it begins. That story tells us what we all do in our own day at every stage. And we all contribute to the pain and the suffering in this world. Fortunately, at the end of the Bible stories, we are back in the garden. God is going to restore the world into a place of beauty with pain banished. And in between these two stories of gardens, right in the middle of all the darkness, there is a story of a tree. Well, not exactly a tree, more a wooden cross. And hanging on the wooden cross, God's own Son, Jesus Christ. And on that cross, Jesus expresses his own suffering when he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? The cross for him, it's not just the pain of the nails. It's not just the desertion by his followers and friends. More than anything else, it is that he has been separated from God. On the cross, we see the blood flowing. We also see the love of God. Because the world is in such pain, such darkness, such suffering, this is God's answer. On the cross, this is Jesus's one-man personal Auschwitz. He gives his all. He gives his all for all of us. This depth of love and suffering and giving, we have a special word for it. We call it the grace of God. You know, there's a particular song, every time I hear it, I just have to hear the first line, and my heart turns over and tears come to my throat. It's the song by Stormzy. The first line, in that lovely, deepy, throaty voice, he just begins, I am blinded by your grace. I am blinded by your grace. You know, we often talk about suffering, evil, pain as the ultimate thing which drives us away from God. But for many of us, we have found that it is that suffering in a suffering world that draws us closer to God. I can't put it into words. I can't explain. I just know Jesus on the cross makes it easier for me to think of the concentration camp. Jesus on the cross makes it easier to think of Bradford City being on fire. Jesus on the cross makes it easier for me to live with my darling daughter Zoe Gamble and all her difficulties. I am blinded by your grace. I am blinded by the grace of God.